Hello everyone, howdy hi, ho hey hoy. We have here a character sheet, a double page spread. You're not going to be able to see it very clearly, but it's downloadable via the Free League website, I think. So you'll be able to get this as one of those resources for players, like all character sheets usually are. Yeah. So, what have we got here on the character sheet? Well, we have well, the top one you saw here was for ships. We're not going to worry about that in scope here. It doesn't cover these videos. But ships would be like a group owned or used ship where you can track all the length of the ship and the signature and the faster than light rating and passengers and the AI and the manufacturer and the internal modules, and it's statted up. And there's a whole deal actually inside this book for space combat, and we actually have a space combat map. You may not be able to see that, but with lines on it with modifier suggestions there for something or other. I haven't read the space combat rules yet, so I haven't got a clue. But yeah, I've had a bit of experience with that with Star Wars Edge of the Empire RPG. Just a little touch upon it, and I really do like that sort of group economy and looking after a ship. That's always a bit fun, isn't it? You get that on, that's, you can maybe twist into that Firefly vibe, maybe. Firefly is like, I think, the greatest sci-fi series ever made, but that's me. Fox. And you know, that whole Cowboy Bebop and sort of those sort of vibes of, you know, looking after the ship and things might get a bit hairy. You got to do something about it. Character sheet then, yeah. So the actual character sheet, which is this main bit at the bottom here, yeah, it is ostensibly the basic Mutant character sheet. All right. So it's got the 4 stats as we knew in Mutant as well, and it's got 12 skills plus 1 extra skill depending on what your career class is. And there's a few differences, and if you've played Mutant then you'll be able to pick this up pretty quickly. If this is completely new to you, well, you know, do your best. But yeah, we've got the 4 attributes being strength, agility, wits, empathy. So each one of those stats has 3 skills attributed to them, and those 3 skills are made up by adding up the amount that's in the stat, the attribute itself, the strength, agility, wits or empathy, and then you add up how many you've got in that skill. You combine those 2 together and you roll that many base dice. So there's 2 kinds of dice in this game, and that's a bit different from the Mutant games, because in Mutant you have 3 kinds of dice. You have the base dice, which are yellow usually. You have the skill dice, which are green, and you have the gear dice, which are black. Okay, so all you Mutant players, you'll be used to this, right? So gear dice are a no-go here, and well, effectively so are all of them. So you don't have 1 separate dice for the skill and 1 separate dice for the attribute. It is just base dice. You now just add up the stat and the skill that associates to that stat. One example being, we have all the skills here laid out around the outside here, and if we were to say do a mobility skill roll, you'd add up how many you've got in mobility, and you'd add up how many you've got in agility. You'd add those 2 together and you'd roll that many base dice, and that, on the face of it, is how it works. That's the skill dice. There is also a second kind of die called stress dice. Stress dice are a whole different take on the universe, and the whole stress system needs to be explained a little more carefully, which I'll do in another video. And the way that is all pervasive, and the way it's replaced the way things worked in Mutant, with failing and taking damage to a stat. Instead you can end up going into a panic roll, but to explain it basically for the purposes of the character sheet video, which this is, I'll say that you have a current stress level, and you roll as many dice as your stress dice as your stress level. So with that mobility, if I was to say everybody run, you'd do a mobility roll, yeah? So you'd add whatever's in mobility alongside whatever's in agility and grab that many base dice, okay? You can use any kinds of dice. You can use, as long as they're two different colours, so you can differentiate, or you can use the actual Free League ones, or you could go on Roll20 and use those ones. So whichever works. Mobility and agility. It would be the same if I asked you to do range combat, fire at something. You'd add up your range combat, your skill in that, and your agility, because that's also an agility skill. So you take that, but you also take whatever your current stress is, whatever level of stress you're at, and you roll that many stress dice. Now, the stress dice are kind of special, because in this game, 6s are successes, okay? That's how it works. The more 6s you have, the more successes you have. So it's nice that if you're stressed, you actually get to roll more dice, so you got more chance of rolling 6s, hence having successes. So the way I might say to you is to deal with a skill. You might be in a fairly stressful position, and you might have accumulated 2 stress. And I might say to you, okay, you're going to try and use this heavy machinery, so you need to do a heavy machinery roll. You're going to try and work this thing, so you take whatever skill you've got in heavy machinery, you take your skill in strength, which is the associated attribute, you add them together, you roll that many base dice, but then you take the 2 stress dice, because that's how stressed you are, and you'd roll them too. Any successes, any 6s, and you've made it. Of course, you can choose to push your roll, and it's the damage to stats that would usually be happening, which is very, very different now to Mutant, because now it's like it can generate panic. Because those stress dice we spoke about, well, those can come up with 1s, and any 1s you generate from that, even without pushing, you've got a panic situation on there. So there's definitely a psychological component going on here within this game. So you can see here, the more stressed you are, the more dice you get to roll, the more chance you have of succeeding. But ultimately, the more chance you've got of those stress dice coming up with the face hugger symbol, which is on the actual proper dice, or 1s on regular dice, being, panic. How, you panicked, and you roll on like this panic chart and see what the heck happens to you, what you end up doing. You gotta be ready to be able to role play, going crazy and freaking out in this game. I mean, you track your relationship with your PC buddy and your PC rival. That's gonna be an ongoing thing. You also have a personal agenda. These can either be chosen straight from the book, or chosen or made up yourself, your own kind of agenda, and it's something that you have to try and play towards at all times. And these things are usually broken down into acts. Even cinematic play and campaign play, they're usually broken down into acts, and you may get several acts done. Well, I mean, it states in the book actually for earning story points, as they're called here, which are story points. If you followed your agenda, that act or what have you, definitely for cinematic play, then the player gains a story point, you know. So you decide at the end of each act for that. And it's the thing to say about that is that the story points, they go to the player, not to the character. So, and you could only hold up to 3. We can get into all the nitty gritty of, you know, you can use your story point to I suppose it's in the same, think of it in the same way as like D&D, what did they call it, inspiration, whatever it was, you know, the dealy-do that let you have a reroll, and you can only have one of those at the time. The GM can kind of hand them out. I suppose it's sort of the equivalent of that. You have a health amount. Your health amount is determined actually by your strength stat, and that's hit, which is why combat can be very fast and brutal, which is why I like it, because it's not long and drawn out like a lot of RPGs do with their combat. Very long and drawn out. So you might have at best 5 health, and you know, a good hit could potentially wipe you out. I mean, you get to do an armor roll against it, but hey. Radiation, critical injuries. If your health ends up at 0, you have to do a critical injury roll. That could kill you outright. And you know, that might be like a lasting niggling injury in a way as well. You've got conditions: starving, dehydrated, exhausted, freezing. Consumables, which are air, food, power, water. If you know Forbidden Lands, then I believe the consumables rules are a bit more like that. We don't need to go into all the details of that right here. And then you obviously track the weapons and gear you've got, and the idea with the gear part of your sheet is you've got 10 lines, and the amount you can carry is usually your strength score times 2, which means, because stats cap at 5, you wouldn't usually, without the help of some talent, be able to carry more than 10 things without facing encumbrance rules. You can attempt to, and start having to do encumbrance rules, rolls and things, to check to see if you can keep moving, or going to have to drop some stuff. So every item you write down takes up a slot out of those 10 slots, unless it's listed as light, which means it takes up half a slot, or heavy, which means it takes up 2 slots. So that's kind of the main sheet. And the armor, of course, that you're wearing. Armor is just an amount that the amount in armor that you've got. If you take some damage, you get to roll those armor dice, and these 6s negate the damage you just. It's all based on these rolling 6s, generate 6s kind of system. And that there is as a look at the character sheet. Basically, you can pick up things called tiny items, which don't go towards your gear threshold. Lots of little things that you can just hold in your hand, and you can track all those on your sheet. The other thing I'd say about the character sheet is, as the rules have always said through these free league games, if it's not written on the sheet, if you fail to put it down, you don't have it anymore. Kind of harsh. Well, I'll see you at the next one.